It is now abundantly obvious that the war between Russia and Ukraine is not likely to end anytime in the near future. However, this furthermore signifies something else. The insatiable need for Western help that Ukraine has will, unfortunately, not go away. The Western nations, led by the United States and the European Union, have made it very plain on several occasions that they do not attach any restrictions or requirements to their assistance for Ukraine. This indicates that Kyiv has the ability to request any type of assistance it seeks, be it political, financial, or otherwise. And the West will go to extraordinary lengths to make it a reality. So you'd ask, this is due to the fact that Western nations have very covert aspirations that their backing for Ukraine would sooner rather than later pay off in the shape of a triumph for Ukraine, and more crucially, a resounding loss for Russia in this conflict. But this approach from the Western world is causing a difficulty for them to deal with. Back at home, and at this point they are aware of it, I believe that everyone is now concerned to the appropriate level. This was said not too long ago by a NATO official, and it was undoubtedly their statement. Both the United States and the European Union are quite concerned about the situation. On Tuesday, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, held a special meeting of the alliance's armaments directors to examine methods to replenish the military stockpiles of member states. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, has practically placed its own weaponry inventory on the line in order to help Ukraine, and those supplies are currently being depleted in order to stop the bleeding caused by a crisis. It is necessary for you to admit that it is a reality in the first place. To be honest, Western nations have at long last come to terms with this problem. I want to cite Joseph Borrell, who is the High Representative for the European Union's Department of Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. Due to the fact that we have been supplying the Ukrainians with a significant amount of assistance, the military supplies of the majority of the European NATO member nations have been, I wouldn't say exhausted, but drained in a high percentage. You need to understand that Ukraine does not place a high priority on the inventory of its friends. All it knows is that these nations possess tanks, missiles, and other weaponry of the highest caliber, which aid them a great deal in their struggle against Russian forces. Consider the case of the United States of America. Washington has given Ukraine the most amount of military assistance of any of the NATO member states. This assistance totals $15.2 billion. The 155 mm howitzers and other behemoths, like long-range heavy artillery, are included in this category. The continued delivery of these weaponry is something that the Ukraine desires very much. However, there is one major issue with providing this help to Kiev. According to Dave DeRoche, an associate professor and senior military fellow at the United States National Defense University, the war-torn nation is exhausting its supply of ammunition at a rate that exceeds the rate at which it can ever be made. Approximately 1 year is required to complete the production of 30,000 arms for the 155 mm howitzer. And with what kind of speed is Ukraine completing these rounds? 2 weeks, 14 days. That sums it up well. It is in this area that the Western world's most obvious errors are made. It started delivering help to Ukraine before it realized the danger that it would have on its own inventory, and it continues to do so. Prior to that, during times of relative calm, these Western nations would produce arms at a glacially slow rate in accordance with the requirements of their own nation. Because of the war in Ukraine, all of it was used up in a very short amount of time. Now, the United States has two choices. Either it can discontinue supplying Ukraine with help, or it may continue doing so using its own reserves. According to KBC, the Pentagon is not enthusiastic about deploying reserves for Ukraine since such resources are intended for use by the United States Armed Forces. The third possibility is to reduce the overall quality of the weapons that are supplied to Ukraine, which would amount to a reduction in the quantity of those weapons. Therefore, if up until now Kiev has been receiving the most modern 155 mm howitzer, it will suddenly be forced to make do with something like the 105 mm howitzer. Obviously, degrading a weapon entails not only reducing the precision of its specifications, but also suffering a severe defeat in terms of the strategy that is being maintained to compete with Russia. Do you believe that the West will be able to emerge from this mess without suffering any significant damage? Sanctions have been placed on Iranian oil in recent years, and particularly under the presidency of Ibrahim Raisi, the United States has severely hampered Iran's ability to freely export its oil to buyers across the world. Despite the restrictions that have been placed on Tehran, Iran has begun to sell close to 40 of its oil. That is quite an accomplishment. And to add fuel to the fire of the Iranian regime's euphoria, the global market for oil is extremely tight right now as a result of limited supply. It has been determined that Europe would source its oil and gas from Iran rather than Russia. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance, and Tehran is quite eager to make the most of it. According to a story that was published in the Jerusalem Post, Germany is reportedly holding covert negotiations with the Islamic Republic of Iran on the purchase of Iranian oil. Moritz Kramer, the head economist of LBW, a German bank that is partially controlled by the state, disclosed this information to the Israeli magazine. According to the head economist of a German bank, intensive discussions are already being done behind the scenes with Venezuela, Iran, or Algeria to fulfill Germany's demands in terms of oil and gasoline. A significant ally of the United States is Germany. It is the most powerful and wealthy participant in Europe, and as a result, it is considered to be the leader of Europe in NATO's vision, this nation, which is such a key partner of the United States. Iran's violation of the sanctions imposed by Washington. It is true that desperate times call for desperate measures, and the circumstances in which Europe finds itself are very much in the category of being desperate. Europe is getting ready to resume its oil imports from Russia beginning the month after next, and the continent isn't really ready to deal with the lack of Russian crude on its markets. As a result, Germany is reaching out to nations who are subject to sanctions in an effort to make up for the gap. The German Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a statement on Tuesday stating that the German federal government has not entered into negotiations with the Islamic Republic of Iran to acquire oil and gas from Iran. During this time, the bank, whose top economist disclosed that Berlin was pursuing serious talks with Iran to acquire oil, removed all evidence of the assertion from its website. When it comes to Iran, Germany has a history of repeatedly breaking related laws. In point of fact, Germany's capital city of Berlin infuriated the United States in 2011 by giving the go-ahead for huge oil transactions with Iran that circumvented American sanctions. Another illustration is as follows. The value of the goods that were exchanged between Iran and Germany during the period beginning in January 2021 and ending in September 2021 was euro 1.2 billion over the course of the same time period this year. When compared to the previous year, the volume of commerce that occurred between the two nations witnessed a 16 increase. When compared to the numbers from the previous year, the amount of exports that Germany sent to Iran increased by 9. That is significant, but the United States is not likely to be impressed by it. Trade is something that doesn't often irritate the United States government too much, but trying to covertly purchase oil from Iran will most certainly do so. Despite Germany's claims that there was no such agreement with Iran, the harm has already been done regarding Germany, along with a great number of other nations throughout Europe. The price of moving away from gasoline sourced in Russia is quite steep. As the cost of their economic conflict with Russia continues to rise, European nations are being forced to strike treaties whose legitimacy is in serious doubt. Do you believe that all of this will end up being counterproductive for Europe? Wait. Here's one more secret news. The U.S. is doomed. New Saudi Arabia China plan to crash U.S. economy. Crash of petrodollar. I know you want to know more about this story, so just click on this video right here.